My new book, The Very Fine Light, has a brief update. And also part 2 of this podcast includes a saint's story. A saint from America who died in the year 1918. First, a book update. Big news. We hit our marketing goal thanks to you. And if you've not already added a comment or star rating for my new book, The Very Fine Light, at Amazon.com, please do. And then go to NicoSteves.com and get on the new mailing list. That's NIKOSSTEVES.com. And now for part 2. Saint Marianne Cope was recently canonized in the year 2012. There are many aspects of her life that are generally reported on, and I've added links to some of these timeline accounts along with photos on my website. Now, Saint Marianne Cope's story, as I understand it, does not report an apparition of the Virgin Mary. However, this story to me is timely with isolation, the unknown about the cures, and how to cope with the spread of a virus and to stay safe. This saint put her faith totally in God. To quote her, when she made her pitch to be chosen to lead a nursing expedition to another land in a medical crisis that was far from home, quote, "I am not afraid of any disease," unquote. Saint Marianne Cope was a nun from the Franciscan order, and today this very community is active. In addition to their missions, they have a presence telling her story at the Saint Marianne Cope Shrine and Museum located on the grounds of a hospital she helped create in the year 1869. That would be St. Joseph's Hospital in Syracuse, New York, which she founded just after helping found another Central New York hospital in Utica, New York, that today is called St. Elizabeth's Medical Center. The period of time from around 1800 through the 1870s, during the growth of our country, especially in these two cities, were following the wild success of the Erie Canal. Syracuse and Utica were vibrant hubs then, as the Erie Canal ran straight through their center cores. The success of the canal generated commerce, yielding financial benefits that allowed the region the ability to want to try to fulfill the American dream for all, that desire to raise everyone to a better life. But those virtuous notions, like any other time in history, had downsides: abandoned children, typhoid, alcoholism, and malaria plagues, just to name a few, in the area. Social solutions included the idea of hospitals and homes for those in need, and St. Marianne's upbringing and church influences during that time converged to the benefit of everyone. While in and around central New York, as a Franciscan nun, she was to become a teacher, principal, even a superior general in her Franciscan community. Somewhere in between, she helped establish both hospitals that became 2 of the first 50 chartered hospitals in the USA at that time. This is where it should be noted that something was unusual in the charters of these 2 hospitals. St. Marianne insisted that medical care be provided for anyone, regardless of rich or poor, young or old, black or white, or religious belief. From the beginning, this was part of these hospitals' cultures. To quote St. Marianne regarding medical care, quote, "We're all children of God, so all are equal in the eyes of God." From the beginning, it seemed St. Marianne Cope always chose one goal: to help others. And she never doubted God would guide her on that mission. I want to focus on her abilities as a leader and the skills she learned from her early life that came together to take her on this path to sainthood. After spending time at St. Marianne Cope's Shrine and Museum, I became more aware of the disease she fought during the last 35 years of her life after leaving Syracuse. Today, things are different and now better for those that contract this disease that is now known as Hansen's disease, named after Dr. Amur Hansen, who discovered its bacterial cause. Today, Hansen's disease is cured by multi-drug antibiotics that may take as long as several years of treatment. This was good to learn while at the museum. Additionally, I learned there is an international organization that even offers the treatment for free, as I understand it. Nevertheless, even today, with this knowledge out there, Hansen's disease is one of the most misunderstood and feared diseases. Historically, it was known as leprosy. St. Marianne Cope, along with 6 nursing nuns from the Franciscan order in Syracuse, in the year 1866, became the first nuns from America to go to another country as missionaries to help with this disease, among others then plaguing the Sandwich Islands. At the time, those with Hansen's disease had but one treatment: banishment from their homes and families, and left to die on a remote island settlement. St. Marianne Cope was born in a German family who settled in the milling district of Utica, New York in the early 1800s in the St. Joseph's Catholic Church community. By age 15, Marianne knew she wanted to be a nun. The Franciscan friars and nuns who served the area no doubt had great influence on her. That included the concepts of service to others, especially those impoverished, and following the rules of founder St. Francis of Assisi. Unfortunately for St. Marianne, it would be 9 years before her dream would come true. She had to work in the mills to support her mother and other siblings as her father became very ill. Once they grew up, and after the passing of her father, 9 years later, she entered the Third Order of the Franciscan Community in the year 1862. It's quite possible that her experiences during those 9 years of factory work gave her an understanding of the variety of challenges people face in daily life. The saint who inspired her at the time was Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, who lived at the same time as St. Francis of Assisi in the early 1200s. He had inspired the young Elizabeth to live a life of giving to the poor. She was of royalty, and fortunately her husband generally supported her ceaseless philanthropy. One time she allowed a beggar with leprosy to stay in the royal chambers. Her husband, upon his return, was furious, and as he stripped the bed, he had a vision of Christ spread on the cross on his bed. Her husband supported her services from then to his death. It's also told that St. Francis himself, along with his first followers, or friars as they're called, lived in almost total poverty, and their first shelter was in the ruins of a former Lazarus or leper house. So the idea of working in a Hansen disease environment was part of St. Marianne's Franciscan order's religious legacy. While a leader at St. Joseph's Hospital, St. Marianne was way ahead of her time. She put into practice standards of cleanliness and protocols for the practice of medicine, including the value of patient rights. Always working for others, she easily climbed to leadership positions, both as the head administrator of St. Joseph's in 1870, and 2 years later she helped relocate a medical college to Syracuse so it would be closer to the hospital, and invited the medical students of Syracuse University to practice at the hospital. 9 years later, at age 45, she was the leader of her religious community. And so it seems possible that when during the call mid-career to help the destitute of the Sandwich Islands, St. Marianne reached deep into the lives of St. Francis and St. Elizabeth as she decided to heed that call, requesting nursing support for the beleaguered people in the Sandwich Islands. The rest is history, the history of how a group of 7 Franciscan nuns built hospitals almost as soon as they reached what is now the state of Hawaii, also homes for orphans. 5 years after her arrival, St. Marianne Cope and 2 of the nuns moved to a leper colony for women on an isolated peninsula where the famous other Hawaiian saint, St. Damien, had been working since 1865 in a leper colony 3 miles away. St. Marianne Cope brought dignity, respect for others, and created ways to help upbuild self-respect in patients at the hospital, plus spiritual growth, centered on the belief that God loves all people. She brought these Franciscan practices to a lost piece of paradise. the chapel there was open to all other religions as well. Just before they left for Hawaii, St. Marianne Cope promised that none of them would get the disease. To date, over 100 years later, not one Franciscan nun ever did. As you can tell, there's much more to her story, so stay tuned for part 2 next week here on Constant Procession. This is Nico Steves. I hope you enjoyed this installment. My book can be found using the title, The Very Fine Light, on Amazon.com. Please feel free to contact me at nicosteves.com. That's Nikos Steves, Steves.com. If you like this episode, and for more, share them with friends. This is Nico Steves. Thank you. See you next time.